Arthur was the best blacksmith in 3 counties before the accident happened. A stallion spooked, his arm went under the hoof, and bones shattered badly. The doctor cut it off below the elbow on a cold November night. Arthur stared at the stump for weeks, barely eating or speaking at all. His wife had left him years ago, so he had no one to care. He sat in his dark forge, smelling cold iron and his own failure. One morning, a knock came from a woman with a small boy. Her name was Nora, and her son Eli was missing his left hand. Eli was born that way, and no one would teach him a trade. Nora said, "I heard you lost your arm, so you understand his struggle." Arthur sneered and said, "I am no teacher, just a broken, useless man." Eli stepped forward and said, "My left hand works fine, mister." Arthur looked at the boy's stump and felt a strange, unwelcome kinship. He said, "Come back tomorrow, and I will see if you have any strength." Nora grabbed his left hand and said, "Thank you, Arthur, from my whole heart." He flinched because no woman had touched him since before the amputation. The next day, Eli arrived early, carrying a small hammer in his right hand. Arthur said, "You hold the hammer with your good hand, not your missing one." Eli switched to his left and swung at a cold iron bar clumsily. Arthur took the hammer with his own left and showed the proper arc. They worked for 3 hours, sweating in silence, missing arms and all. Nora watched from the doorway, holding a basket of bread and cheese. She saw Arthur's face soften when Eli finally struck a solid blow. Arthur looked up and said, "The boy has grit, Nora, more than most men." She smiled and said he gets it from his father who died in a fire. Arthur asked how the father died, and she said saving Eli from flames. He looked at Eli with new respect and said that is a real hero. Every morning for a month, Eli came to the forge to practice swinging. Arthur taught him to brace the metal with his partial arm stump firmly. Eli taught Arthur that missing a hand does not mean missing a life. One evening, Nora stayed late after dropping off her son. She asked Arthur why he never remarried after his wife abandoned him. He said, "Because no woman wants a one-armed blacksmith with bad dreams." Nora said, "I married a firefighter who left me a crippled child and debt." She said, "I would marry a kind man with one arm over a cruel whole one." Arthur looked at her and saw something he had buried long ago. He said, "You are too good to waste on a man like me, Nora." She said, "I will be the judge of that, Arthur, not you yourself." She started bringing supper for him and Eli every single night. They ate at the forge table, 3 misfits sharing 1 tin plate. Arthur noticed how Nora laughed when Eli made a stupid joke loudly. He noticed how she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous. He noticed that her hands were calloused from washing laundry for money. One night he said, "You work too hard. Nora, let me help you somehow." She said, "You are helping me by giving my son a future, Arthur." He said, "I want to give you more than that, if you will let me." She stopped chewing her bread and looked at him with wide eyes. She said, "Are you asking to court me, Arthur the one-armed blacksmith?" He blushed and said, "I am asking to try, if you can overlook my stump." She reached across the table and held his left hand tightly. She said, "I have overlooked nothing because your stump does not define you." Eli looked up and said, "Does this mean Arthur will be my new papa?" Nora laughed and said, "Slow down, son. Let the man speak for himself." Arthur said, "I would be honored to try, Eli, if your mother agrees." Nora said yes, but we take it slow because my heart has been broken. Arthur courted Nora by fixing her wagon wheels for free always. He carved a wooden rose with his left hand and gave it to her. She hung it above her bed and cried because no one had tried so hard. Eli improved at the forge and could shoe a horse by 6 months' time. Arthur told Nora that her son would be a master blacksmith one day. She kissed Arthur's cheek for the first time, right there in the forge. He felt the kiss like hot metal branding his very soul forever. He said, "I have not been kissed in 7 years, Nora, not once." She said, "That is 7 years too long for a man like you, Arthur." On the first anniversary of their meeting, Arthur asked Nora to marry him. He got down on one knee using his left arm for balance carefully. He said, "I have no right hand to give you, but I give you my left." Nora fell to her knees and said, "That is the only hand I want." Eli cheered and ran to tell the neighbors that his mother was engaged. The town gossiped that a one-armed man and a widow made strange pair. But the preacher said, "Love does not count limbs, only heartbeats together." They married in the forge with the anvil as their altarpiece. Arthur wore his best leather apron and Nora wore a simple blue dress. Eli stood as best man, holding a horseshoe he had made by himself. Arthur promised to protect Nora and Eli with his one strong arm always. Nora promised to never see Arthur as less than a whole man ever. The preacher declared them husband and wife under the iron sign. Their first dance was a clumsy shuffle because Arthur had no right grip. Nora held his left hand and placed her other on his shoulder stump. He flinched, then relaxed, because she touched it like any other part. She said, "This is part of you, and I love every part of you." Arthur cried and buried his face in her hair, smelling lavender soap. They built a cabin behind the forge with Eli's help and strong backs. Arthur designed a special anvil brace so he could work with one arm. Eli became his apprentice and then a partner in the growing business. The forge became famous for left-handed tools made by left-handed men. Nora ran the books and swept the floors and brought hot coffee daily. She became pregnant in the second year of their peaceful marriage. Arthur was terrified because he could not hold a baby with one arm easily. Nora said, "You held my heart with one arm, so a baby will be fine." Their daughter was born with 10 fingers and a loud, healthy cry. Arthur counted her fingers 3 times, laughing with tearful, wet eyes. He said she has more fingers than both her parents combined completely. Nora laughed and said, "You are ridiculous, and I love you for it." The daughter grew up helping in the forge, learning both left and right. She asked why Papa had only one arm, and he told her the truth simply. He said, "An accident took it, but your mother gave me a new life." She said, "You are not missing anything, Papa, because you have us." Arthur hugged her with his one arm and felt utterly whole in that moment. Years later, Eli married a girl from town and took over the forge business. Arthur retired and spent his days carving wooden toys with his left hand. Nora would sit beside him, reading aloud from old romance novels happily. He would stop carving and listen because her voice was his favorite music. One evening, she asked if he regretted losing his arm that terrible night. He said, "I regret the pain, but the loss brought me straight to you." She leaned her head on his shoulder and watched the sunset together. He kissed her temple and said, "Thank you for seeing a whole man in me." She said, "I never saw broken, Arthur, only waiting, and you waited well." They grew old, and their grandchildren would sit on Arthur's lap carefully. He told them the 2 left hands could build anything, including love. On his deathbed, he held Nora's hand with his one good arm tightly. He said, "I am leaving you, but I take nothing because you gave everything." She said, "Go in peace, my one-armed hero. I will meet you soon enough." He smiled and closed his eyes while she sang the song from their wedding. The camera pulls back to show the forge chimney smoking still and a wooden rose.